Is that a sign-up sheet right there?
Where's,
Could be right on the chair.
oh, you have a sign-up sheet. Look at that. Whoa.
Yeah.
David, you did a good job.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you know,
Yes.
I'm fine about this.
So, do you want this on too, or is that sufficient, or what do you want on?
I mean, for me, this is okay, but you may want to have that on too as well.
So I have to look right at you?
You have to look at me. Look at the camera. You know?
Will you be recording the Zoom meeting?
Recording in progress.
Excuse me?
Or will you be recording the Zoom meeting?
It's being recorded.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just now, it just got noticed that it's being recorded. Yes.
Thank you.
So where does that recording go?
Oh. I don't know. Where does the recording go? How does it work?
That's wild.
The recording is on my computer for right now. And then I will send it to Hank.
Ah. Now we know. All right. We also, David, are you taking in the two participants that are online?
Yes.
Okay.
But I still need to have whoever Doucette is. I don't know what your first name is or your last name.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Heath Doucette.
Okay.
Do you want me to mute myself again?
Yes, please.
Okay.
You never know with Doucette. It could have been any one of you. So thank you. And Ed Harvey, that is you?
Correct.
Excellent. I know when I sometimes sign in, I'm Linda Terry, and you know, it doesn't work. All right. So I think I did not hear from John Allen at all whether he would attend tonight, and I think probably not. So let's get this thing started. We have 4 members of the planning board here: Sarah Kimball, Scott Badger, Chris McAleer, Bill Terry. And on Zoom, we have voting members David Campbell and Kathleen Dougherty, who are allowed to participate by Zoom because of the circumstance, and we have alternates attending who will not be voting this evening. And Dick Bennett and Jim Wasco. So first order of business is to review and approve minutes of the December meeting.
That is correct.
I have a motion to accept.
I move, accept.
I'll second.
I have a motion to accept and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. All right. On the agenda, wonderfully prepared by David Campbell, is the opportunity before we go to the public hearing. Is there any public comment on any matter not expected to be before the planning board this evening? Hearing none, we'll proceed. Everybody okay to proceed to the public hearing? Scott, you gave us some guidance that we should go directly to it. So we'll do that. Welcome attendees. Welcome to being here. And you online that I cannot see, but I guess you can hear us. I already introduced our planning board members, so I'm not going to do that again. The voting members are the members of the board. John Allen is not here this evening, the selectman's representative. So we are going to be limited to the regular members of the board, 6 members of the board, since the alternates cannot replace the selectmen for a vote. All right, procedures, very simple. If you want to be recognized, let me know, and we'll recognize you. If you could please direct your comments to me, and if there's something that needs to be directed to any one of the other members, I'll be happy to do that. Okay? All right, we have 2 things for the public hearing, and the public hearing is for us to present a couple of warrant articles for the annual meeting, and these will be put on the ballot prior to the meeting and accepted at the meeting if they so pass. One is a really critical one, and that is the groundwater protection district that we're proposing to enable, and that we'll go into a lot more detail. And the other is a minor change to the short-term rental procedures, which, from my perspective, it's more a simple item that we probably should have had the first time through, but forgot, to ensure that we have continuity of information. That being said, we'll begin with the groundwater protection. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Sarah Kimball, who's done all the work on this, and she's really done a great job taking something we got from model language, and also taking a look probably at a couple of other boards' reckoning of the model language, and putting it into English and something we can all read, and you can actually look at it and it makes sense, at least from my perspective. And there's some detail I look at and it doesn't make sense to me anyway, but that's the limit of my understanding of it, not what she's written. So please.
All right, well, the whole emphasis on groundwater protection began a while ago with the Saco Headwaters Alliance, who are wanting to protect the whole aquifer of the Mount Washington Valley. And it reaches up into Jackson. Jackson probably has the smallest amount of it, but they wanted to protect it. The water is good now. There's plenty of drinking water available. And the aim for the Alliance, as well as everyone else, is to keep it as clean as we can and to prevent any contamination of the water source. And so what they've done was to create a model ordinance, and this was created actually by DES. They have a Drinking Water and Groundwater Bureau, and the head of that bureau actually put the model ordinance together. And of the towns that have been putting this in place, Hart's Location just took the model ordinance as it was, put the name Hart's Location on it, and put it in. Others, towns like Freedom had the same reaction to it as we all did, which was, huh? What's this? And the model ordinance has a lot of relating from one section to the other. Well, this works with that, so, and it seemed to me that really it's just a matter of reorganization was needed. So I took what Freedom had done, since we seemed to be in agreement, and worked with some of the ideas that they had and just put the ordinance together so that it made sense and flowed and we knew what it was talking about. And if Part A relates to Part C, we'll put the two of them together. So what we have is the ordinance. We have copies of it up here if anybody needs them. Thank you. And this isn't something new off the shelf. In fact, there's more than 90 towns in New Hampshire have some sort of groundwater or aquifer protection ordinance in place. So we are not unique in this at all. So the way it is organized is that a groundwater protection district is established as an overlay district. And what it is made of is all of the wellhead protection areas, which are for all the community wells and the public wells, the public water supplies. And this is information that is available from DES. And so what I did was to contact the GIS person at North Country Council, because she would have the capability of making a map and getting all of this information on it. The Granite database, which has been used for a lot of map making in New Hampshire, is available to everyone, but it's in the GIS format. And so, and the way it works is that there's different layers you can put on top. You can get the topographic layer, then you can put the roads and political boundaries and water and various items that are of interest to you. So for our case, we wanted to know where the areas of the aquifer are. And if you're looking at the map, you can see that it's the hashed areas, and it's essentially going up our the streams that...
Lori or Lori McAleer.
Sorry about that.
Sexy grin.
Catch your attention. Anyway, so we have the aquifer there, which is information from the U.S. Geological Survey. We also have on the map, I asked her to put the parcels from the tax maps so we can get ourselves oriented. The roads are on there. And what is in pink on the color map, but it's, you see lots of circles there. Those are the wellhead protection areas as defined by DES. So if you have a community well, you have to go through the state to get various, just show they have various regulations that you have to adhere to. And the size of the wellhead protection area is dependent on how much water is used on a daily basis. So if it is something that is you have a lot of people using are hooked up to that well, then the area of the protection area is going to be larger. And then we also have the Jackson Water Precinct, and that is not a well, but it's actually a water intake that is in the gravel bed that's underneath the Ellis, so that anything that would get into the river itself has the potential of being a contaminant for the water that is gotten by the water precinct and distributed. So the water precinct had put together a surface water protection plan as a report from 2014, and in that plan, they had delineated a protection area for the river, which is 300 feet to either side of the Ellis, and that was the area that they were indicating would be the protection area. And so what I did, because we don't have a wellhead area, is to add that to our overlay district. So because the water precinct is actually probably the largest community public water source that we have for the town. Okay, so that's the district. Now, what are we protecting within that district? This is pretty well it's a proactive ordinance in that it's not anything that's going on right now in the district is probably adhering to the regulations that are in this ordinance. And the way the ordinance is organized is, well, the thought behind it is that to list out those uses that are prohibited in the district. And so that list is, well, it's on page 4, but it just lists 7 items, which is you can't have a solid waste landfill, you can't store a whole lot of road salt or de-icing materials in bulk, can't have a junkyard or a snow dump, or a wastewater or a septic lagoon, a petroleum bulk plant or terminal, or gasoline stations. All of these are potential sources of contaminants. And so those would not be allowed within the district. Now, in addition to what's prohibited, there is listed performance standards for those permitted uses. In other words, there are things you can do, but there are regulations. And a lot of these have state regulations from DES or other RSAs covering them. And so you say, well, why do we have it, isn't putting it at the town level, isn't that a bit redundant? But actually, it is a good idea because it's just another set of eyes on the whole situation. In that we all know that the state has limited staffing. They can't keep track of everything that happens in all the towns, and so it is helpful for the town to have its own, be able to have its own regulations, which are, in most cases, mirroring the state regulations, but then just make sure that it's another check to make sure that everybody is in compliance. Okay, so the performance standards really have to do with, just to give a quick summary, it's regulating substances. You can, and regulated substances is the language that's used here, but those are essentially all the contaminants that are listed in 40 CFR 302, which is a federal regulation. And in one of the documents, actually it's a document with the model ordinance in it, those are listed. And it's about 40 pages of fine print, 2 columns. And so there are, yes, a lot of regulated substances, but many of these are ones that, we wouldn't even use in everyday life, but they're used in industry. So that if you would have an industry here that would be using a particular substance that might be a contaminant, you want to make sure that that doesn't get into the water, into any of the wells or the water intake. And so, but if you have any of these regulated substances that are in a container of less than 5 gallons, that is would be allowed, a permitted use, but it must be in a product-type container over an impervious surface, and designed such that it can't get into stormwater or and ultimately into the groundwater. And probably the contaminant that would be of most concern for us would be petroleum products, heating oil. We have underground and above ground storage tanks at a lot of the buildings around, and those are regulated by the state, but what is helpful to have is to have it in the town level, just to make sure that all of the tanks are in compliance with the state regulations. So that's what many of these performance standards have to do with, is regulating any of the substances that might cause contamination of the water. And then there are also some conditional uses. In other words, use that you would need a conditional use permit for. And this is, there's just 3 of them. One is handling the regulated substances in quantities in excess of 55 gallons or 660 pounds dry weight. And for that, you would have to have an adequate spill prevention control and countermeasure plan. And that plan is, the details of that that are needed are listed in the ordinance. And also, if you have any use that's going to increase the impervious surface, in other words, you know that if you have a big parking lot, and what happens there is that any of the precipitation doesn't get down into the ground. It runs off the parking lot and picks up whatever substances are there and concentrating it and in the stormwater. So you want to make sure that that if you have a impervious surface that is either more than 15% of the total lot or 2,500 square feet, whichever is greater, is that if you're going to be creating that, then you would need to get a conditional use permit, and the performance standards for those conditional uses are listed out. And most of them are just in creating a stormwater control plan and how you're going to prevent pollution in the stormwater.
There's a question from someone online.
Okay.
So go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. I think the water ordinance as proposed is an excellent start. I do have some questions about how complete it is, and if the board would consider putting forth something more along the lines to talk about preventing the privatization and commercialization of water in Jackson. For instance, I don't see anything that prohibits anybody from bottling their own water from their own home as a home use, or anything about the quantity of water used. So I'm just curious if that would be something that we would consider or would look to do in the future to add. I think being proactive is probably the way to go with this. Thank you.
This particular ordinance is for the protection of the groundwater, and its focus is on preventing contamination of the groundwater, not in actually using it for bottling and selling and so on. That would be a separate ordinance and by itself, because it would not be involved in preventing contamination. Okay, there are, going back to, there are some exceptions to some of these provisions, and those are exceptions such as that if you have an underground storage tank or above ground storage tank, that you are in compliance with the applicable state rules, then you don't have to go along with some of the performance standards that have to do with the containment and so on, because that would all be covered in your with your applying with the complying with the state rules, and you're allowed to have more than 5 gallons of petroleum in your car, and some exceptions, pretty practical ones, such as that, without going through each one of the items. That is sort of a summary of the ordinance right now. And if anybody else has questions about it? Yeah.
I have a question. Sure. Kathleen?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. When you have all regulated substances that have to be 5 gallons or more, it has to be on a concrete surface. Is that correct?
Impervious surface. And the way the impervious surface is defined, it's a surface that your regulated substance, whatever it is not going to react with it, and it can't pass through that surface. And so something like concrete or and some other earthen or wooden or gravel surfaces that could react with it those would not be considered impervious. It's got to keep the regulated substance contained and not let it get into the groundwater.
Well, suppose you had a 5 gallon can of gasoline in your shed, and you use for the lawnmower and for chainsaws and things like that.
Yep.
Is that allowed?
Yes. It's anything that you're storing in greater than 5 gallons in a larger container, a larger amount. So it's
most of the gasoline things are in 5 gallons.
right.
Those big yellow containers.
Yeah. So those are fine.
Okay, those are fine. Okay, and if you have a shed or you have to lock it, and you have to go back every week to make sure nobody's gotten into your shed.
No. Well, that would be for, let's see. In the exceptions, if you note, Kathleen, there's a whole list. It's on page 4, where are exempt from the performance standards, which have, let's see, 5 through 8, where you have to have it stored certain distance from the water drains, and you have to have secondary containment and clearly marked and is stored in a secured location. There are certain things, if you have it stored in containers less than 5 gallons, those performance standards don't apply. And
What a 5 gallon tank can of, gasoline for your lawnmower?
yep,
You can't do it then.
well, the 5 gallon is the cutoff point. So you have a 5 gallon can, that's all right. But if you have a 25 gallon can, then you've got to be a little bit more careful as to where you've got it close. And remember, this is not townwide. This is just within the groundwater protection districts.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
So if you look at the map, it's not a very large percentage of town. Granted, it's in the denser populated areas, but it's not all of it. And it's those areas which are either over the aquifer, and which includes right in town here, and within the wellhead protection areas, which I think one is Eagle Mountain, and up to Black Mountain, there's a swath there where the circles all intersect. So that would be in that district. But then there's a lot of Jackson that would not be in the district. So.
Thank you for clarifying that, Sarah. I appreciate that. And besides that, we've done a wonderful job on it. And thank you.
Sarah, question then, to Kathleen's point,
Yeah.
then is it with a capacity of 5 gallons or less? Or if you have a 5-gallon tank, then that's something more than, less than 5 gallons?
Yeah, it should say 5 gallons or less is okay.
And so
It's,
automobile gasoline tanks?
those are,
Exempt.
those are exempt.
Those are exempt in the upper section.
And one question I had going back, I think it was Heath maybe that was asking about bottling.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess I would see that potentially as part of this ordinance because it is a protection ordinance, and if there was a operation that potentially would deplete our water supply, I see that as,
right.
and so I think it might be something we want to look at as to what potential an operation like that there might be. I don't think we should hold back this ordinance, but it might be something that next year or following year we would add to it. If that's a real concern that we have the potential for a Purity Springs or something to start up here.
I think the potential is probably not that great, considering that we're on the very, very
Right.
edge of the aquifer, and anything that you look at it, they're not all connected.
And I would agree, it's just that that would also mean that we probably don't have a lot of water to cover if a smaller operation went in or something. It might be something to look at, what's the size of our water supply and
Right.
What-
Well, just knowing
what percentage use of it are we already at?
the trouble that a lot of people who are trying to dig a well to get water, some of them have to go down a tremendous amount of distance to be able to get it, and that's getting water from cracks in the bedrock and so on. And I know of one house which looking at its location, it is in one of the areas of the aquifer, and that they were wanting to do geothermal, and found that they had a lot of water was coming out, and it's because they were right over the aquifer. But that's very, very limited area of town. Is the aquifer.
Any other questions, discussion?
I have a whole bunch of comments.
Good,
Good, can I take off my mask and talk?
sure.
Sure, from there? Yeah.
I was tested like 2 days ago, and I'm still good, so.
If we can take a picture of you with your mask and report.
I'm gonna leave the thing with Sarah so
Okay.
she can respond.
Okay.
Whatever.
No, I think this is a great ordinance. It's a great start. I just wanted to point out, in town here,
Please, can you identify yourself?
I'm Kevin Bennett. I'm the,
We knew that, but.
building inspector and health officer in town.
Thank you.
There's a lot of other wells, or community wells in town that aren't represented here because the state doesn't regulate those because of the size of them. And just for an example, like up on Whitney Loop, there's 6 houses on a community system. Middle Mountain Road, there's a small well, I think there's 4 or 5 houses on there, on that system.
And that's because the public water system is defined as at least 15 service connections.
Correct, right. So, and the next point I want to make too is, I think everybody here, unless you're hooked up to the Jackson Water Precinct, has a well. So it's almost like the whole town should be protected under this, just not the zones. Like I said, it's a good start, something to look at.
But don't we have well protection radius around every single well?
You do, and that's basically based on, that's more to do with septic design and to keep your water safe from, bacteria and stuff, but there's, as far as I know, there's nothing in there about any kind of storage or, like you can't store stuff in your, in that circle, but,
Yeah, Kevin, one of the things that we looked at, the model that we looked at actually says to exclude property that is an individual property.
oh, so excluded, is that what they're saying?
Included, yeah,
Oh,
excluded, no, excluded
Oh,
entirely.
excluded. Yeah,
And here, the way this is written, they are included,
yep.
but it's fairly limited.
Mm.
And so, I guess the question is, how much ability do you really have to go to each individual home and be able to monitor that? I mean, even the way this is written, it's it would be difficult to monitor.
It is, yeah.
But it gives us an opportunity, if we do observe something that's not right, to go after it.
Yeah.
But if it were town-wide, we don't need to monitor it town-wide. It would still serve. I mean, I guess I sort of agree, why not? If it's not a good idea to dump something here, why shouldn't it be a bad idea to dump it over there too? But again, I would see that more as a next stage.
The point of the ordinance is trying to keep large polluters out. And that, I think really probably the two most prevalent potential contaminants in the town would be petroleum products and maybe, as you say, from septic systems getting into wells.
Yeah, and one of the biggest ones is home heating oil.
Right.
And we're seeing less and less of that in town, but there's still a lot of stuff out there. And probably since I've been here, I've probably been involved in probably 3 or 4 tanks that I've come across that have been leaking. And either leaking or they're just not maintained. And I shouldn't say this for all the oil companies, but some of them are horrible about monitoring their own, not their own tanks, but tanks that they fill. They got one branch of the company that just fills the tank. They never see the tank inside, but then like a service guy will work on it. And just an example, we had a house and actually there was a report of a leaking tank. I went in there because they pulled a permit. It was almost 3 years later, and I noticed the soil was totally saturated with oil. I called up the oil company, and they said, "Oh yeah, in our notes it says it's leaking and has to be dealt with." That was 3 years ago. So, sure enough, within the next 30 days, the tank was gone. But I've come across another one here. It was basically buried. Well, it wasn't buried. It was covered. You have to be able to see the tank. You have to do self-inspections on the tank. This thing was covered in a little building, and just the fill in the vent was sticking out. Same thing, the guy who filled it just filled it. That's all his job was. Basically, when I found it, it was already 6 inches in the ground because the footings just blew out. So the bottom of the tank was sitting in the ground, rusted out. And we've had a couple spills that the DS had to come in and excavator, seal trucks to take all the soil out. There's a fund for that, but I think one job was over 100,000. The other one was, well, it was about a $50,000 job after they took out, I don't forget how many, like 1,000 yards of dirt. So, but there's a fund for that. But it does happen, and it's happened a couple times here in Jackson. So that's one of the biggest polluters. Is just the home heating oil tanks. Everything else are pretty, anyone who's had buried tanks in town, they're mostly all gone. I don't know of any anywhere. Service station's gone. Used to be one at Dana Place, that's gone. And then the ones that are above ground, the DES, they inspect, like here at the town garage. Every so many, twice a year or something, someone comes around and does an inspection report on it. There's one over at the golf course over there. There's also chemicals stored over there too, but they're in the, like nitrogen and stuff. But that's stored in the garage in a certain area. The fire department kind of knows about it. But anyway, I was just, Mark was saying, why not protect the rest of the town? And like I said, this is a good start, but it's something to look at.
Are there anything, particular areas that you think should be added before we go on with it?
I'll bring up something, I don't know if it makes a difference, but the springtime, they get the water from the Ellis River. And, every weekend for like 3 weekends up at Tuckman's Ravine, all that water basically comes down and dumps into the Ellis. It kind of goes both ways. Some goes north, some comes down the river. You stick 2,500 people up there who go up there with a case of beer or whatever, and no portable johns and all that. So I don't know if that's an issue or not, but just bringing that up.
There's a bit of distance between Tuckerman's Ravine and
Well,
Arlington Ditch.
maybe they shouldn't be taking water into the system for those periods of time. I don't know, but.
Well, you can test to see if it
Yeah.
has any effect on it.
Yeah, and just a note on that too is, I know I've brought this up before, the Wildcat River Conservation District. If you read that, I think it's 92 pages booklet that was put out, and I know there was testing done back in 1980, and it was like 86, 87, somewhere around there. So there's a baseline of the water standard in certain locations. If you read that document, it says in there that testing should be done on I think like an annual basis. As far as I know, it has not been done, and I know I brought this up once before, and I don't know if, I think Sarah, actually, your husband was going to look into it, I think, at some point, or do some self-testing. But it's a good point to take a look at that, because there's a baseline back from the 80s. I think upstream you're fine, but maybe not during the summer months.
Well,
downstream from the falls, I don't know.
that might be something that falls into the purview of the Conservation Commission.
Yes, and I have, and at this point, nothing's been done, so just pointing that out.
Okay.
Let me and then a couple other notes here. You have a parking lot up on Carter Nacho, and I bought this up from, they're pretty good about it now, but it's something to watch. The parking lot that's used for ski touring, and it's probably right around there, 2,500 square feet. I mean, sometimes there's 20 or 25 cars in there. It's quite big. And the same thing, there was an agreement between, I don't know who it was, ski touring and, I don't know, maybe the town or something, but it was, basically it was to like seed that every year after the winter season, to get grass growing again. And sometimes it's quite difficult to do that, so I think in exchange, they put, like the special wood chips along the river there to protect any kind of runoff. So it's something to watch, especially you use one car that's, old and leaking oil and dropping gas or whatever, especially when you got ice-coated parking lot and, you get some rain and just where it goes, Wildcat River.
Yeah, the intention of this is not to prevent people from having parking lots or to have businesses or to have homes or to have driveways. The intent is to protect the groundwater and to ensure that there are no specific actions that are blatantly going to cause issues. I don't think you can create any kind of ordinance that's going to keep people from enjoying their property in a reasonable fashion, as has been customary for the last 100 years. So I hear what you're saying. On the other hand, it doesn't sound like those are practical considerations for groundwater protection ordinance. They might be for other kinds of views of how we look at things, and it might be something that we ought to consider, not necessarily here in the planning board. It may end up being something that needs to be looked at by the select board or by the conservation commission.
I'm surprised, I mean, even before this was even put out, a lot of this was already watched by either DS, just the fire department, even the, well, we got the beauty salon, that's a special case scenario with their septic system too, that DS watches because of the chemicals that go into that septic system. And look how close it is to the Ellis/Wildcat. But I'm just pointing that out, that's all.
And we acknowledge that there are an awful lot of regulations on the state, which I think that was what Sarah was commenting on earlier, is that this is not an overlay on them. It is simply an opportunity to ensure that we have local ordinances in place so that if we do observe something, we don't have to wait for the state necessarily to get involved in the process. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Sarah,
Yep,
someone has a comment from the Zoom.
okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, Heath Doucette again. Thank you, Sarah, for the response. I think that's great. I do think the water ordinance as it currently is written and proposed is excellent. I just hope that you guys will consider going forward putting some protections in place. I know we are not directly over the sweet spot of the aquifer and that maybe the big players wouldn't be so interested in Jackson, but I do think we have some concerns about overuse. We have a ski mountain in town, a couple of golf courses, some hotels. Water is finite, and the lower the water levels go, we've had some very severe droughts in recent years. We've had some community wells, entire neighborhoods dry up in my area on Tin Mine. I know that when that happens, the contamination levels in the wells goes up significantly. We have higher radon, higher sediment levels, and then there's a lot of after effects from the drying up of wells. And there's also a lot of effects from drilling new wells that are seen by the neighbors in the neighborhood. So just being cognizant of it moving forward, I would just so appreciate to see the town be proactive about it. I think it would be really awful if we had somebody sort of start something and we couldn't get ahead of it. And I just looking through the ordinances did not see anything specifically that would prohibit anybody from doing some sort of boutique water company per se. So just thinking about the amount used, I know that many of the world organizations that look at protecting waters talk about conservation being the #1 issue. So that's all. I would appreciate if you guys would seriously think about that moving forward. Thank you.
Okay.
So noted. Any further discussion?
Just one more thing. I noticed too in this, one of your purple circles here, there's actually a junkyard, classification as a junkyard definition by the DES. I've tried to do something about it, but it seems like the town doesn't put it this way, follow through. And there's ways to, I don't know if they want to go to finding, but it's definitely in that circle. And there's probably 3 or 4 vehicles that are, well, they're slowly disappearing because of the vegetation, and you can't see them anymore, but.
Where exactly is that?
Let me just say it's in your very close to your neighborhood.
Oh, I know where you're talking
Yeah,
about.
okay,
Okay.
all right, so, yeah,
But it's below me, thank God.
so, yeah, there you go,
But existing operations are grandfathered, right, so
you know.
that junkyard is safe.
And just a heads up, I mean, I'm not gonna say what the places are, people can look it up, but just in the past, maybe 2 months ago, there was a public water system that had a boil water order. Like I said, people can look it up, I'm not gonna mention the name. It was an E. coli trace in the water system. I'm not gonna say the neighborhood or whatever, but like I said, you can search it on the BS water site, so, you know, there's problems, and a lot of it's got to do more with septic systems than contamination by, you know, chemicals or petroleum products, so, just a heads up.
And as far as your junkyard goes, existing non-conforming uses may continue. But they have to be in compliance with all the applicable state and federal regulations, including the Environment Water Quality 401 Best Management Practices rules. So, I don't know if there are specific rules within that 401 section or the other DES rule making to specific for junkyards, but that would be, if they are not in compliance with those, then there is grounds for inspecting and perhaps.
Sir, I have a question. I mean, there are a couple of golf courses in town. Do they take the water from an aquifer, or do they take it directly from the river?
What, the golf courses?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Okay. I mean, wouldn't that be a concern? I mean, I would love to see them take it, if they're gonna water their greens, to take it directly from the river as opposed to, you know, from the aquifer or from the town water system?
Obviously, that would be preferable, but I don't know any controls on that.
Just curious.
I think I can answer that. I think the golf course over here has a permit possibly to pull out of the Ellis River.
Okay.
They do pull that, and the Nesson look, but I don't think they've ever actually ever used it. They have a huge pump system in the Ellis River, and it was gonna be designed for a slash waterfall river. I don't know if it was gonna dump back into the Ellis, I'm really not sure, but someone spent a lot of money, they put the culvert right in the middle of the river with all kinds of pumps, and, you know, they call it our electrical supply, because these pumps are huge, but the project never got done, so.
Okay.
It still sits over there, you can see it, you can go, you walk past the Cover Bridge Hotel, it's somewhere right in that location, you'll see it right in the middle of the river, big tile, you know, those 4 or 5 foot tiles. And it's just full of stone with a pump in it, huge pump. You know, like probably like 500 gallons a minute pump. So.
Obviously, everyone's concerned about the groundwater, and we have nothing at all right now. And this is a good start. All right, so shall we go on to our, thank you very much for your comments, but I appreciate it. Appreciate everybody online made comments. I'm gonna steal that back. Sharon?
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right. David, I'm going to put you on the spot because you have the wording for our proposed changes to short-term rental.
We want to vote on the,
Oh, do we need to vote?
if we vote on the water ordinance,
If we're going to bring it up.
put it to town.
put on the town.
Okay, are we ready to vote? Do we wish to make any changes? Other than this?
I move that we put forth the ordinance as written.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to recommend this to a warrant article. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. All right, sorry, let's go on to short-term rental language.
Okay, this one will probably have a little less discussion than the groundwater, but we'd like to propose that a change to Article 10, dealing with short-term rentals. We add a section, subsection to that adds that sets forth that if a property transfers ownership, a new application will be required by the new owner, along with all applicable fees associated with that application. So that would be if a property has a permission to do a short-term rental and it's sold to a new property owner, and it is going to continue to be a short-term rental, that we want them to fill out a new application, considering that their tax, meals and tax number would change, potentially their contact information and everything about that short-term rental would change, so we require them to complete a new application and the associated fee.
David, would there be a time frame on that? In other words, before you can re-enter it into short-term rental, you have to do this, I don't know, 30 days beforehand? Anything like that?
We didn't put a time frame because the ordinance before that talks about before you enter into a short-term rental process, you have to fill out this application. We could add a date if everyone agrees that that's appropriate.
Well, it would be, you didn't have to get the permit before, after you own it, and then if you're going to use it for short-term rental, you'd need to get the permit before you do it for short-term.
Okay, so it's self-explanatory?
I would think so. And if
Okay.
they didn't want to do a short-term rental, then they wouldn't put in for a permit.
Well, I was just concerned that somebody would start advertising it before they actually put in the request for a permit.
Well, obviously they could, but then they would be in violation and therefore be subject to potential.
Would cut their legs off, right below. Okay. I just, that's fine.
Now, would this then count as a new application, and it would be after the ordinance was in place, and so they would be limited to 30, or whatever, forgot, is it 30 rentals per year?
No, this is a conditional use permit that has already been granted to the property.
Is it, okay.
And so this is really just more of a bureaucratic process to update the records. In fact, I think if the records were not updated, that conditional use permit would persist until, and short-term rentals could be done again at some point in the future once the permit is is updated. But I don't think there can be any sort of sunset to the conditional use permit once it's in place.
All right, so
So this is really
we
just
don't have the option then of managing to get all the short-term rentals underneath the same regulation?
Well, one thing we have talked about is having a sunset on the current grandfathered short-term rentals that have now been sort of trickling in over a couple of years. And I mean, personally, I feel people have had plenty of time to gain the permit if they wanted to do short-term rentals, and shutting off the permit applications for applications for rentals that would only be allowed as grandfathered, I think would be appropriate at this time. But any property already with a conditional use permit, that permit exists in perpetuity with the property.
unless things change, unless somebody changes how we
Mistake
do this
law.
or in the current process and what we have on the books, that's what we have.
The question is, does the planning board want to think about doing, getting some sort of sunset clause? And that the whole point of having the,
Right, well, I think that's really up to the Board of Selectmen at this point.
Well, there's that, and there's also the fact that when we did this process, we were informed by our legal counsel about the limitations we had on doing some of the things that we were suggesting would be prohibited under state law. And I think we also have the Senate bill sitting out there that
We'll change that.
will make some changes no matter what we think we should like to do. It's going to change a little bit of the what's
I
going
mean,
on out there.
when this same bill went through before, it did not look like it would pass from the ground level views. I think if the bill goes through, that may change things, but I would not, I don't think that we should plan according to the bill being passed.
Right, and nor have we, I think. We've tried to say, look, it's important for us to take care of business without waiting for the state to do what
And
it's going to do.
I think it would be appropriate to, recommend to the Board of Selectmen, if this board agrees, that there be a sunset on conditional use permits being granted to grandfathered properties.
Just say the bill is not in stone yet. They're expecting several amendments. And again, one of the things that's interesting is that one of the initial things we thought about is having a fire department inspection is actually in the bill, which I find interesting.
There's a question from the Zoom.
Okay, please.
Hi, Heath again. I can see why you would want to have some continuity in accessing, the ability to know who's renting, what the contact information is for owners. I guess the question, you were just talking about it a little bit. For those properties that are operating with a conditional use permit that are currently grandfathered, if they have a situation where, let's say the owners die and the family inherits the property, but they don't stop renting, because of course renters rent, they book out a year or two in advance. You don't necessarily want to cancel everybody's vacation for no reason. Also, there are startup costs to being on hosting platforms, usually about $500. So I don't know if you would want to just torpedo that unnecessarily. I think that some people have a concern that there would be a period of time where the property was not rented short-term rental, that if they were to go back to that, would they still be grandfathered? Is there, you were just sort of talking about that a little bit. I missed a little of it.
Yeah, again, the way the language is written directly says that the permit goes along to the property. The transfer of ownership is not going to change the conditional use permit. What we're looking for here is simply making sure that we have new information relative to a new owner. That's all.
Right.
That's the only change we're really considering here. We're not looking at making any other change. Some of the other conversations that we're talking about are things that we may look at this next coming year. But they're not under consideration for us this evening.
I think that it would be necessary to do that because there'd have to be new tax information, tax numbers for the meals and tax.
Yeah, the R&M tax.
Yeah.
And the other piece that's important is that we also ask for the owner to sign an affidavit that says they'll take responsibility. And the application itself also requires that we have a notice of a legal entity that we can serve notice. Somebody who's lives in New Hampshire, or an organization that's within New Hampshire. So if we have a complaint or concern, we can deal with it more directly.
This sounds
Sure,
like,
and I just ask really quickly, I've always had a question about how would you address the situation where you have a renter who is Airbnb-ing a property? I know of several that are visiting nurses, they travel, they rent, and then they offset their expenses by renting out their places while they're gone. But the owner is not involved in that process. So what would be the process for that? And how would this proposal affect it if someone currently has a permit with the town, but then they stop renting and the owner wants to do it now, or a member of the family who's perhaps in a trust? Because often the meals and rentals licenses are attached to the listing, and you can have more than one taxpayer ID associated with the M&R license. So in other words, you could have a group of 10 or 20 people in a family trust. We have many of them in the town of Jackson, and all of their numbers are associated with the M&R license. So I guess I'm thinking ahead to some of these more complex scenarios, which I know exist, and how would the town address that? I mean, I think it would be a little bit punitive if somebody passed away and their family continued to rent under the same listing. That's just what I'm asking.
All of what you're asking there is not germane to what we're discussing tonight. And okay, and that's a separate conversation. But to answer your question, the relationship between the town and that property is the property owner.
Yep.
It is not to do with whomever they license to rent it or whomever they contract, whether it's a property management firm, Airbnb, their brother-in-law. We don't really care. Our relationship in the town is with the owner of the property. They're the ones responsible for having the room and meals tax number. If they're Airbnb, they have a special deal with the state so that they don't have to have an individual one. And those are all separate processes and things that we've already identified within our ordinance. And the only thing we're doing tonight is to ensure that if there is a transfer of ownership of a property, that we have within our code specified that we need someone to
step up to the plate.
Put up an application, sign an affidavit, pay a fee, and ensure that they are having the proper relationship with the town.
That's great, thank you. Now, will realtors be involved in this process? Will they have a requirement to ensure that that information is relayed to any buyers of properties?
No,
so that they are aware?
Responsibility is the owner's responsibility, like many things are. Like paying taxes.
Okay, so the owner will need to review the ordinances of the town of Jackson to know whether or not they're going to potentially fall without that 60-day window. What exactly was the what was the time limit about?
That's also specified in the current ordinance, and it would just be the same. I believe it's a 30-day. I'll have to check it.
45, didn't we change it?
It's some reasonable number. Do you remember what our section?
In section 4.
4, right? 4.
And Heath, the time limit that we were just discussing wasn't an application time limit, for like a first application. It was really more so that we've had the ordinance on the books for 2 years now, but we still have short-term renters applying for applications under the grandfathered part of the ordinance. And
Sure.
it would appear, it seems to me that, 2 years is more than enough time for any grandfathered property to have applied for the application or not, or applied for the permit or not. And that it's probably time to shut that door.
They've
But
all been notified, haven't they, from the town?
I don't know. I mean, that we have an ordinance on the books, that's a notification. But there's a separate time limit for, is there a time limit in there? Is there I don't remember.
If you look at 4432, it says owner of the short-term property shall file a conditional use permit with the application prior to operating a short-term rental.
Right.
So it's up to them.
So what if I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yeah.
What if somebody purchases the property and the listing? This happens quite a bit. You will see on VRBO and Airbnb. Same listing, same rooms and meals number under new ownership. And, people do that for the continuity of the reviews. They keep their maintenance staff intact and their housekeeping staff intact. And they want people to know that it's under new ownership and we're the same listing. So I guess, are you expecting people to cancel their listings in order to make?
No, I think we're just expecting them, we're expecting them to file an application, in a reasonable.
In a timely manner.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, I thought I heard you say that they couldn't be advertising, which having the listing up is advertising prior to having the CUP in place. Maybe I misunderstood that.
Again,
I think that if there are advertisements already in place, so long as the application is filled out in a timely manner, that's fine. If new advertisements are being put up by the new owner and the application has not been filled out yet, that's a different situation.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I guess I'm thinking that might be a little bit hard to tell because, as I just explained, people will just purchase the entire listing and you won't necessarily know that it has changed hands. I mean, the town would on the town level, but if you're looking for listings that you didn't see yesterday, you won't necessarily a difference.
There's no enforcement going on at that sort of granular level right now.
That's the
job.
job.
You set a reasonable time period. What is the reasonable time period we're talking about?
Before money changes hands, I guess, would be the.
Okay, so
I think that's
before
the
somebody
job.
has closed on a real estate transaction.
I think it's the job of the purchaser to know that. And
Right.
I think what you were saying is that if the purchaser is negotiating with the seller, and the seller has already got the place rented out, that's their problem to figure out how they're going to do that. That's not, and again, the obligation is to the purchaser if they want to continue those reservations, they've got to apply for this permit, so to speak.
So that process really needs to take place prior to the closing of the real estate transaction. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
That's between the purchaser and the seller, and their lawyers and their title people to figure out.
And it might, if the next rental weren't, for 3 months after the closing, then it probably wouldn't need to occur before the closing. If the next rental is the day of the closing or the day after the closing, then that probably should be done prior to the.
Right, and there's no way that a seller would not have to disclose the fact that he's got these rental agreements in force at the time.
Okay, so the town is simply looking for an updated contact information and affidavit and the fee, and that's simply a filing fee, correct? Or an administrative fee, rather?
It's an administrative fee, yes.
It's an administrative fee. So, and the timeline, I guess I'm still unclear about the timeline that is the expectation by the town before there's some sort of negative action.
That's all specified in the ordinance. If you please read the ordinance, you'll find your answers. We're not here to answer questions about things we already have on the books and the process.
I guess there
that
were
we've already
questions
created.
about that. That's why I'm asking. Thank you, though.
Okay, they're in there. The information's there specifically, and I can give you a broad brush on it. It's very simple. We get an application, and we're going to do a couple right after. And that is that we get an application. It's presented to the planning board. The planning board looks at it, reviews it, determines whether or not they're going to accept the application or not. We sometimes will and sometimes will not accept an application, but we will forward them on to the Board of Selectmen. Board of Selectmen will review them and they can approve or disapprove the application. So the timeline on that is sometimes as many as 45 days between the time the application's received and the time that they might hear something negatively on that. If it's an existing structure, somebody already has something out there on an application, we're not going to go through the approval process again. It's an application to ensure that we have updated data. The process for an application on an initial process is the one that would go through the whole 9 yards.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're not going through the entire process again. You're simply updating the contact information.
That's correct. It's not, the conditional use permit's already been granted in that case.
Okay, thank you.
There's another comment from Ed Harvey.
Ed, please. Oh, you'll have to unmute, thanks.
Sure, yeah, I had thrown some comments inside. I didn't want to interrupt. I guess my question is, I'm trying to figure out the 60 days. What happens after 60 days if the new owner isn't taking on the past, simply moved on, bought a property because they wanted to buy the property, but then a year later, they are now ready, they did some renovation, whatever it was that took this time, maybe just their decision, but if they're getting back into it, is there any starting over period? Is this trying to put the sunset in place, or are we just going through the process again?
Right now, what we're proposing this evening is, and what we currently have on the books, is that the conditional use permit runs with the property. And the only thing we're doing here is, in your instance, the scenario you had was, the year goes by and they go, yeah, I want to do a short-term rental, they need to put an application in. Not for a conditional use permit, but for updated data.
Very good. Okay. I was just trying to figure out the 60 days, but it seems more of a wishful thinking, or if they're getting right into it, that's fine. I was trying to see if there was something changing or penalty on the other
Yeah,
side.
no, the whole idea here is just simply to say, look, if we have a new relationship, we need to need to know who the relationship is with.
Understood. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I move that we put the ordinance forward as written.
I'll second it.
I have a motion to forward as written and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No opposed. Who motioned who seconded? I didn't catch their name.
Scott was the motion, Chris was the second.
Thank you.
And Kathleen, you had an aye?
What?
Were you an aye? I couldn't hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I was.
All right, thank you. So that's unanimous. And are we done?
That's
with
the
that?
last of the public hearing.
I think, unless there's any further discussion, this public hearing is now closed. It's time for us to start returning back to our regular meeting. For all you who joined in for just the public hearing, thank you very much. You're welcome to stay on for the regular meeting, but we're awfully boring. Okay.
Next agenda item is that draft for review that was on the table.
Yes, this is a new item.
Yes.
And okay. And David, for the Zoom participants, did they get a copy of this?
I can share it. I have it here if they want to read it.
Please. Do you want to go read it, or I can read it?
You can.
Okay. Bottom line. Okay. Bottom line on this is that there is the town is looking to put forward a warrant article to do a land swap, and the land swap is regarding some property that's up on the Vista Way, right of way. And I'll read it very quickly. To see if the town will vote to accept 0.045 acres of land from map V10 parcel 212B, owned by the Helfrich Realty Trust and hereafter referred to as the Helfrich parcel, with said transferred land to become a portion of the Vista Way right of way owned by the town, and simultaneously transfer 0.045 acres of land from the Vista Way right of way to the Helfrich parcel, with said transferred land to become a portion of the Helfrich parcel. The purpose of this transfer being to resolve historical encroachment issues by both parties onto the land of the other. Land areas being transferred are shown on the plan developed by Horizons Engineering and available for review at the town office. Said plan is to be submitted to and approved by the Jackson Planning Board. Once approved, will be recorded at the Carroll County, not Carroll Country, Registry of Deeds.
And what are we doing with this?
What we are being asked to do is to quickly review this and to take a look at a picture that shows that they're giving equal amounts of property to set what's already being done right. Here, take a look at this drawing, it's crazy. Bottom line is that the town owns land that actually goes right into where the house is, and they own property where the road is. So it doesn't make any sense. And what's happening is just swapping the land so that the road belongs to the town, and the land that where the Helfrich parcel is actually part of the Helfrich parcel.
So is this a lot line adjustment to us?
It would, for us, it would be a borderline, adjustment, yeah.
So does the town approves the swap and then
Yes,
lot line adjustment?
it's a BLA from our perspective, yeah.
Okay.
Can we vote on this at this point?
We can either,
You can vote to recommend it.
we can vote to recommend it, and then we can vote to do it after this is approved by the voters.
Okay.
I don't think we can approve it.
I was just gonna say, just, amend this to say county, as you pointed out.
I'm sure that's just a
That's how
Typograph.
wonderful typo. Yeah, I think we can vote to recommend it, and then once the vote is in, assuming that this would be voted and approved, we would then approve the fact that it's,
So it would just come before us as a regular value
Yeah.
adjustment.
and it would have to have an appropriate plat and that sort of thing in order for us to sign off on it.
Yep.
So,
I will make a motion to recommend this as is it a warrant article? Is that
yes,
correct?
yeah,
Yes.
It's actually, it's more, the planning board recommends that this be approved
right,
Yes.
by the town.
yeah.
I second that.
All right, I have a motion by Chris and a second by Scott. And we're recommending that this be approved by the voters. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye? We're all ayes, no opposed, so it's unanimous. All right, next item.
Okay, next item is the short-term rentals. We have 2 of them. The information was sent to you guys earlier. So the first one is 82A Wentworth Hall. It's a 3-bedroom approved condo. Their ad is for a 2-bedroom, sleep 6 max. Advertisement is correct. Application is signed and correct, and so is all the documents provided.
Sounds good.
This is Arthur Begin.
Begin?
Any questions?
Anybody have a question, any concerns? Do I hear a motion?
I move that we recommend this. to
We
the-
accept the application. We have a motion to accept the application.
I'll second.
I have a second. The same 2. Scott, Chris.
Just jump in and just.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, let's go to the next one, please. Turn the page.
Next one is Jeanette Heidemann. It's at 93A Dismore Road. It's approved for a 3-bedroom. They're actually offering or renting it a 1-bedroom, 2-person max. This is another one of those organizations that they cannot provide the ad until it's approved. We've done these before. So the recommendation we give to the selectmen is that approval is pending the ad once submitted.
I know Jeanette very well. I would recommend that we approve this subject to
Subject to comment.
subject comments.
I have a motion, a second?
Second.
I have a second from Sarah.
Wow.
All right.
All right, just to change things up for you.
I am here.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Oh my.
That's it.
Dick?
I have one quick question.
Oh.
Sorry.
Hang on.
And it sort of pertains to this draft thing. If I had a piece of land that was essentially unusable and wanted to get rid of it, is the town required to take it from it? What do I do?
Well, that's a great question, but are they required to?
I'll
No.
take it.
No.
But so the town can continue to charge me tax on land that I would abandon?
You
I'm
could,
just curious.
you can do a variety of things. You could likely, and this really has nothing to do with planning board, but you could put it into continuous the use, the CU,
Yeah.
and drop down whatever.
Well, it's gotta be 10 acres to do
Yeah,
that.
it's tiny,
Yeah.
it's probably less than an acre, it's on Route
Give
16.
it to a monastery.
It's on Route 16, just
Take a
south of
taxi
the
down.
place.
Is it,
The hillside goes up directly from the shoulder. Why my dad had it, I have absolutely no idea. The only value to it is it appears to be a small corner of a piece of land that was originally owned by Bradford Washburn. So that's its claim to
Who's
fame.
he,
So
a
is it-
painter?
Bradford Washburn,
Yeah.
he's a photographer. Think Ansel Adams, but
Yeah, yeah.
more renowned in the scientific community.
How big do you think this property is?
A quarter acre, maybe? There's literally nothing you could do with it.
well,
It's so
is
steep.
it, what's it contiguous to?
What other properties?
Yeah, like
butters
you
would be the only ones that might not give it away to a butter, maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure a butter would even want it. Really, there's nothing you can do with it.
Geez, I wanna say something, but I won't.
Okay, well,
So I'm just curious if.
yeah, it's not a piece of business that really pertains to what we do here on the planning board.
Unless it was,
Kevin?
I got a comment, just the state's looking for charging stations on the Route 16 corridor. And I know they're putting one in at the Shaw's that way in the parking lot. I don't think there's anything up in this area.
I'm not even sure there's enough room
That's a wonderful.
for a pole
I thought about
charging
it,
station.
and you need power there, but just a thought.
Okay. Yeah, we can't have a gasoline station here, but we could have a charging.
A charging station, yeah. I would like to make one other comment, and that is, Jim Wasco asked about, when I put together the annual letter about short-term rentals and the volume of short-term rentals. And I think, as I communicated back to him, I didn't think that was a really good place to put that stuff without really quantifying, qualifying everything. The activity that we've had of short-term rentals applications has been well within our expectation, and in fact has been less than what we expected to receive over the 2-year period. We're almost at 2 years in April. We're at a lesser volume than we expected, and there aren't the number that we really thought we were going to have. No, we're not sure if that's because of compliance purpose, or not. But I would like to suggest that when we do take a look at what we're doing for this coming year, we consider what's happening with the state bill that's coming up, and whether or not that actually does get legs under it. And if not, to your point, Scott, what things should we get after anyways? And let's make a determination sometime mid-year about what that should be.
Dick?
Dick, I think you need a little cue time. Do I have a motion?
You have a motion.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
second,
I have a motion to adjourn, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Thank you.
I do have once we shut off this,